Okay. Welcome, and thank you everyone for joining here in person in COP27, as well as those of you online. My name is Lana Wong, and I'm pleased to be moderating today's event on the global trade of used vehicles and motorization management in Africa. This event is co-organized by the African Union and the World Bank in partnership with UNEP and the Netherlands and hosted here at the UK Pavilion. So I just want to thank all of these partners for making this event possible. So before we dive in, let me set the stage for our discussion. The number of vehicles in developing countries is expected to double in the next 20 years. The quality of these vehicles and how they are operated in developing and developed countries will influence the future growth of GHG emissions from the road sector. Poor quality vehicles are also bad for air pollution and road safety. There's increasingly a green divide between developed and developing countries when it comes to the quality of their vehicle fleets and the outcomes such as GHG emissions, road fatalities and injuries, and local air pollution. The other part of this agenda is the trade of used vehicles. Developing countries rely heavily on importing second-hand vehicles from developed countries, and the trend in high-income countries to end the sale of new fossil fuel vehicles in the next decades could have a major impact on this trade. So at the same time, we must recognize that fossil fuel vehicles will be with us for some time. One scenario is that the electric vehicles end up in the global north, while fossil fuel vehicles end up in the global south, creating another dimension of this green divide. So in this session, we hope to tackle some key interventions that we should prioritize in developed countries, developing countries, and international organizations so we can work towards making all vehicles, wherever they are in the world, as fuel efficient as possible. So let me introduce our esteemed panelists. We have with us Her Excellency Dr. Amani Abu Zaid, the Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy of the African Union. We have Nicholas Hegelberg, the Global Climate Change Program Coordinator for the UN Environment Program. We have Her Excellency Viviane Heijnen, the Minister for the Environment of the Netherlands, Mr. Daniel Essel, the Deputy Director for the Ministry of Transport in Ghana, and Nicolas Pelletier, the Transport Global Director at the World Bank. So to start, I'd like to welcome Mr. Nicholas Hegelberg to give us a scene-setting background on this issue.
Thank you, Lana, and you actually did quite a good job on that scene setting already. So on behalf of Inger Andersen, who was not able to join us here today, I'm stepping in to give a little bit of an overview of where we are. Just a few weeks ago, we launched the emission gap report, and frankly, we're off target. We are at best, absolutely at best, we are heading towards 1.8 degrees. That's if we implement 100% of the NDCs and 100% of the net zero targets. To get back on track for 1.5 or frankly even 2 degrees, we need to implement solutions across energy, industry, transport, buildings, agriculture, and forestry. If we not succeed in all of those, 1.5 is gone, and 2 degrees is probably also gone. So that brings us then to transportation. So you, Lana, had a few of those statistics already, but if things go as they look right now, by 2050, one third of all emissions are coming from the transportation sector. And used vehicle, the transition over what happens with all those vehicles that are on the road right now, they will play a role if the numbers tally up towards 1.5 or not. So currently, the cars that are exported from the global north and increasingly China, they are on average 15 to 18 years old. They're really polluting. I can even think of my first car I have. It was a deadbeat car. It smoked like a crazy one. I tried to fix it, but that car should just really be dismantled and disappear. I really hope it's done so already. So the responsibility for addressing the old cars is really with the exporters and with the importers. And the exporters will need to take their responsibility to put in place the standards of what kind of vehicles can be exported and what are the cars that, that frankly needs to be dismantled and put into recycling. In terms of the importers, there's plenty of things that countries can implement, and I saw some of the speeches there on the front row, so you will talk a little bit more of it, but ranging from the quality and age of what cars can come in and fuel standards. So in terms of the opportunity here, there is an opportunity to leapfrog, just like with mobile phones. We don't have to go to landlines, you go directly to mobile phones, and that's the exact opportunity that is in front of us as well. And there are good examples, Morocco, Egypt, many countries in Africa and Kenya, even where I live, have put in place these standards. It has not increased the price of the cars, it actually just increases road safety and air quality. There's a lot of questions for us still to answer. What to do with how to recycle the existing car park, what to do with lead acid batteries, what to do with electric vehicle batteries. So circularity and collaboration will be absolutely critical. And there's plenty of work for all agencies, all governments. So I think we're going to be meeting also next year talking about the same things. Lana, I would like to hand back to you.
Thank you for that scene setting. So let's try and dig a little bit deeper. I'd like to welcome the Commissioner to share with us the perspective from the African Union and the African continent. Africa receives the largest share of exported used vehicles and is the region where this agenda is perhaps the most critical. So what are the major challenges and benefits of motorization management, and what actions would you like to see in these countries?
Good afternoon, everyone. Allow me at the outset to welcome you to this session, to thank the World Bank for partnering with us on it, the same with UNEP and and for the UK for hosting us. But I would like also to extend a special welcome to Her Excellency the Minister, and to my brother for the Ministry from Ghana, and all the audience. As you rightly said, Africa actually receives half of the used vehicles worldwide. That's huge. That's huge. And to add to this, actually, Africa still relies heavily on road transportation. Road meaning cars, buses, trucks, more than any other mode of transportation. Not railways, for instance, not bikes, for instance. Causing the emissions from the road transport in Africa is about 40% of our emissions come from road transport. This is the double almost of other regions in the world. So this is how serious the problem is. And when I say 40%, or when I say emissions, yes, of course, the climate is an urgent agenda for everybody, but also everybody's health. It's the air that we breathe. It's serious costs for the humans, for the cities, and for the economy and the globe. The problem is not dying out because, again, this is the fastest growing continent in terms of population. And it is the fastest urbanizing. So the number of cars, if we continue on this trend, the number of cars will double very soon, unless drastic measures are taken. Really happy to say that many African countries, even regions, have banned used vehicles. I mean, recently you have been reading this in the news. East Africa banned it completely, and there was a whole row, but they stood their ground, and I'm really happy with that. Different countries, including this one, including Ethiopia, Morocco. I mean, we are doing our best. I mean, our countries are doing their best in order to ensure that this import-export traffic of used vehicles is either stopped or limited to the maximum. Having said that, and this is a discussion I had with the World Bank right before this session, we have to provide an alternative. An alternative not just in terms of fuel. I mean, what the African Union is doing is that we are trying to alleviate the load from the roads into more sustainable, but also more effective modes of transportation. Say, if it's public transportation, if it's, or if it's railways, or even in the case of intra-African trade, even other modes of transportation. But railways are very much underrated on the continent. Very few countries have effective and efficient railway systems. And I'm happy to see increasingly countries are focusing or trying to implement railways that are electrical, even either in the cities, tramways, and urban transportation, electrical transportation. Electric buses are on the increase in the country, so that's all good. Even in the country where we are, the program that was even then supported by the World Bank, among others, and probably UNEP as well, since 2007, if I'm not mistaken, has replaced petrol with natural gas. And more recently, and I believe this would be particularly interesting to the Netherlands, there is a whole campaign of Bike for Your Life, I think the title of the campaign is. So subsidized bikes, especially for young people, to use bikes, and it's on the increase. And increasingly, we're seeing in the big cities also the e-bikes. So there's a whole movement, but we need much, much more. Again, it's a huge continent, and it's growing continent. Urbanization is growing very fast. Now, if we go back to the issue of fuel, for instance, yes, there is prospects for good progress in terms of new fuels that are being put forward. Batteries are one of them. Some countries where are even thinking of manufacturing or started the manufacture of batteries locally. It's still starting. I mean, this is nascent. It's a nascent industries in our continent, but we want to take it further and explore more on the public transportation, and I repeat, public transportation, the active transportation and railways, and we do believe that with these we can do wonders, in terms of both making transport much more effective for everyone, but also much more sustainable for the country and for the planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. And now I'd like to turn to Commissioner. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, Commissioner. I would love to turn to the Minister. The Netherlands has been active in putting this issue on the international agenda and calling for action for both exporting and importing countries to ensure that the EU only export vehicles that are fit for purpose and compliant with standards set by importing countries. So what can be done to get more developed countries to take shared responsibility for ensuring that used vehicles they export are roadworthy and less polluting?
Well, thank you so much. I'm very honored to speak here today, and I would also like to thank the African Union and the World Bank for the invitation to do so. You asked me a very specific question, and I think that it's important to focus on three elements that I consider to be of critical importance, and that are export standards, enforcement and maintenance, and support for implementation. So if you look at the export standards, it is rightly so that you already mentioned that many import countries have adopted or are in the process of adopting their vehicle fleets, the modernization of the vehicle fleets. And it is now also up to exporting countries to mirror the policies that are being put into place as soon as possible and adopt policies to improve the quality of the used vehicle export. Because I'm strongly in favor of using a valid roadworthiness certificate as a prerequisite for export, as well as to consider means to discourage or prevent exports of used vehicles with an emission standard below Euro 4. And I will use upcoming regulatory reform processes in the European Union to put it more on the agenda. Because I really do believe that what you rightly said, everyone has to take their responsibility. So it's a matter of the countries here in Africa to take the responsibility to set higher standards. On the other hand, it's also important for us as exporting countries to lift the bar and to also take responsibility of what we are exporting, because we live in one world and we don't want to shift the problem to a different location. Can you hear me, Wannen? Should I lift it up a little bit? Yeah, I'm tall. So secondly, it's important to promote enforcement by training vehicle inspectors and countries that have adopted policies to modernize the fleet. Because you also need to be aware of what you should check. And motorization management and well-maintained vehicles are a key strategy to reduce climate and polluting emissions from vehicles, as well as improve road safety, because that is important if you look at the bike. Of course, we are a cycling country in the Netherlands. We just decided to invest over almost 800 million euros in cycling infrastructure, additionally to the one we already have. And it's a very good means of transport. Maybe not in the very hot countries I was thinking, but especially when it comes to electric bikes that you mentioned. There are huge opportunities there because we have to take everyone along, and combating transportation poverty is an important point to my political agenda. And it means that you shouldn't only focus on electric cars, but also on other means of electric transportation, and electric bikes can really expand the action radius of people, and that means also the opportunities to find jobs, to travel to education, to meet family and friends. So there are huge opportunities there as well. And then lastly, we have to find clever financial mechanisms to fund it. And I call on the World Bank to set up specific support for that. And last year, the Netherlands, as the first donor, put in 800,000 euros in the global facility to decarbonize transport of the World Bank. And I would hope many other countries will contribute to that too, because it would make a huge difference if we can all share the impact. So that would be my contribution, and I'm a bit sorry that I have to leave a little bit early, but I have some time to also listen to the rest of the panelists.
Thank you. And I know, given that we've got some shifting schedules, we haven't been running this as a traditional panel, but thank you, everyone, for being flexible. So now, hearing about the shared responsibility and needing the alternatives, let's hear from a country perspective. So I'd like to call Daniel Essel to reflect on the fact that Ghana has taken a comprehensive set of actions to prevent the negative impacts of the trade in used vehicles. So what have been the effects of your actions on the quality of the vehicles fleet in your country?
Yes, thank you very much for the warm welcome. And then I want to also stand on behalf of my minister to extend his apologies to you. In fact, he was billed to be here, but unfortunately could not be part. And I'm happy with what the minister said, that it's a shared and collective responsibility, and therefore we need to work together. Now, to start off with, for us as a continent, I think the biggest challenge is how to transition to clean and safer mobility, albeit the issues of the lower income levels of our people, and then the funding constraint on the part of government. I think these are the key issues that confront us. And looking at our setting, we are focused both on the vehicle side and then looking at the fuel issues. On the vehicle side, I think you've mentioned a lot in terms of what we've done with age restrictions on the vehicles coming in. But on the fuel, we have a zero tolerance level for lead in fuel. That, for the past 15 years, has been the standard for Ghana. We've also gone a step further, ensuring that issues of sulfur content in our fuel are also reduced in line with what goes with the Euro classes of vehicles. So at least for now, our standard is on Euro 4 vehicles. We're now doing about 50 ppm for the sulfur content. What we've seen over the period is that because of these interventions, improvement in the quality of fuel, issues on age restrictions from the import side, we've seen gradual improvement in the vehicle fleet in terms of the age and the fuel economies of these vehicles. I think 3 years ago, the UN environment was very keen in supporting us, and we did a baseline assessment study of the vehicle fleet that we have for LDVs, the light-duty vehicles. And all those shows that there have been some gradual improvement in the fleet that we have. So right from 2016 all the way to our baseline studies, we saw gradual reduction in the fuel economy that we have. So that will be it for now, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for that perspective. And so now we turn to Nicolas Pelletier from the World Bank. So let's talk about this green divide in transport that's emerging. So the emissions and safety of vehicle fleets are improving in developed countries, but not in developing countries. And this could actually get a lot worse as the technology improves in the global north, especially through EVs, and the export of used cars continues to the global south. What role can international finance institutions like the World Bank play in helping to tackle this divide?
Thank you, Lena, and very glad to be part of this panel with the Commissioner, the Minister, the Director from Ghana, and my colleague from UNEP. I won't repeat what has been said, but this is a real issue for both climate and development. There are about 1 billion cars in the world today. According to certain estimates, there could be up to 3 billion cars by 2050. We know that the number of cars is stable in the developed world, but it's growing fast in the developing world, and especially in Africa, it's growing even faster. No? So if we don't change the course, we're going to have a very big problem arising. As the North is electrifying its fleet, the risk is indeed that all vehicles, some of the dirtiest vehicles, will be shipped to the south. This is already the case in a country like Côte d'Ivoire. The average age of freight vehicle is 21-year-old. 70% of the vehicle that were purchased were used cars, and even 15% of them were more than 20-year-old. No? So just to give a scope of the problem today, which is even going to be worse tomorrow. So there are various blocks to be put together in order to tackle this challenge, both on the regulatory side, but also on offering alternative and on the financing. I think we can feel very encouraged from what the Commissioner mentioned this morning, that a number of African nations are taking bold actions to regulate the import of used vehicles. This is the case in Eastern Africa, as we heard from Dr. Amani. It's the case also in West Africa. ECOWAS recently passed a legislation imposing a Euro 4 standards for the import of vehicles. And limiting to 10 years also the age of those vehicles. No? The fact that some courageous European nations like the Netherlands are pushing also a parallel agenda on the exporting side, I think will be a really nice complement. Once we have those two pieces of regulation, both on the import and the export, I think we can have some hope. Now, the third element there is obviously enforcement. And this is where an institution like the World Bank can help. We are in discussion with the International Association of Vehicle Inspection Authorities, and we can work with countries to provide technical assistance to strengthen their capacity to enforce those regulations. The Commissioner was mentioning the need to have alternatives. This is where public transportation is key. This is where active mobility, promoting cleaner modes of transport is so important. And with the Global Facility to Decarbonize Transport, to which the Netherlands has contributed to, we are advancing both the active mobility agenda, building biking lanes. We have a very encouraging program in a country which is in a different region of the world, Peru. But we are also advancing in mobility on the African continent. We recently published a study showing that the best market segment to advance e-mobility in Africa is 2- and 3-wheelers, electric bikes, electric motorbikes, electric 3-wheelers, and that's an agenda that will complement the regulatory on the regulatory front. If we manage to overcome the initial cost for transport operators to clean their fleet and to invest in and modernize their fleet of vehicles. No? So this is where the World Bank can help, both on building capacity, both on helping design program to help also set up and enforce policies, and also offering some financial solution to so that transport operators in Africa can modernize their fleet. No? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Nicolas. So let's turn back to our colleague from Ghana and look towards the future and think about all that has been said in terms of needing to try and accelerate progress on this agenda. Could you share with us the next steps in Ghana's strategy to further decarbonize the transport sector and improve the vehicle fleets?
Yes, thank you. I think the colleague from the bank set the tone for the discussion, especially in the decarbonization agenda. I think it drives on one, having accurate data to inform policy, and that is what we are doing as a first step. We have a fleet that we started gathering data since 1995. And this has been accumulated over the years. So if we tell you we have 2 million vehicles, these are very cumulative figure from 1995 to today. And this is what we want to work with the various stakeholders to clean the fleet data that we have. That is the first step. So what we are doing is to try and digitize our vehicle records as a first step. Then we also have we recently introduced a law that sought to completely ban the import of vehicles older than 10 years. That is the new law. Implementation is but it's something that we're working to scale it up. In that new law, we sought to even ban the import of accidented or salvaged vehicles. That is provided in the law. So vehicles that do not meet those standards are not allowed in the country. We've even gone ahead using the ECOWAS protocol on vehicle import. That's the Euro 4 emission standard. And fortunately, I was the chair when the ECOWAS sub-region met to discuss the modalities for the implementation of that provision. We had a whole discussion on having some conformity assessment test as a requirement for vehicles before they are being allowed import into the country. So this is more like a requirement that Ghana is looking up to, that for any importer who intends bringing in a vehicle, you need that conformity assessment test to be done at the country of export before it is being allowed. So these are some of the things that we are looking at. We're also having discussions on EV. We see EV as one of the big, or the next big step, in that we see them coming in mainly as used vehicles. We also see local capacity to even assemble or manufacture. And that's where the discussion is. So the policy focus is on both sides, both ensuring that the vehicles coming in meet some standards. EVs are more efficient when they are new, but once you get EV coming in at the age of 10, then it's like a recycling issue, and you need to see how you can use policy to address. So we are looking at it both from the used vehicles import side and then the local capacity to also manufacture. We are currently working on the policy framework. There are a number of measures that have been proposed, and in the interim, we're seeking to have some zero ratings for the EVs coming in. The focus is on trying to have some capacity to manufacture them locally. The more we try to scale up, then we go into issues of public bus service. So in brief, these are some of the interventions we're looking at. In terms of dealing with the issues locally, the vehicles that are already in-house, we have available some capacity in terms of ensuring that they are roadworthy. We have some guidelines on emission testing that we are currently rolling out. So these are things that we need to do going forward. We have so far about 27 testing centers that does more of vehicle emission testing and roadworthiness certifications. This is not the physical inspection that is being done, but these are using equipment base for the testing of these vehicles, just to ensure that they are fit for road use. The intention is that this will be scaled up across the whole country. It's only in some key parts of the country, the southern parts, the middle belt, but when you go up north where the fleet characteristics are a bit low, it's a bit of a challenge because it's purely private sector driven. The private sector is motivated by profit, and there's a need to have that complementarity once you want to go up north. So in brief, this is what I would say for now in terms of what the government of Ghana is doing to ensure we are able to safeguard our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Great to hear the progress that you're making at the country level. So I'd like to turn it back to Nicolas from the World Bank. The World Bank, like other MDBs, has to engage ministers of finance and line ministries like transport and environment to design operations. So what do you see as the key points of engagement at the country level on the issue of secondhand vehicles and motorization management? And what is the World Bank planning to do to support countries in Africa, like Ghana?
Yes, thank you, Lana. So, motorization management and the regulation of the trade of used vehicles is not only good for climate, it's a development issue. And I think it's important to remind this. It's good to improve local pollution. It's good for road safety because cleaner vehicles are also safer vehicles, and they are also more efficient vehicles. So it has also positive spillover effects on the performance of logistics and the reliability of logistics in Africa. In Africa, the World Bank is focusing on 3 strategic areas in the transportation sector. The first one is urban mobility. The second one is regional connectivity, and the third one is rural accessibility. And at least the first 2 pillars offer some great opportunity to engage on this issue of the modernization of the fleet. For urban mobility, which encompasses all the activities that we can do to improve, to reduce congestion in urban settings. When we work on public transportation, it's a good opportunity to engage with informal transporters and not only focus on the establishing a mass transit system, but also looking for opportunities to work with informal transporters, with taxi drivers, to look for opportunities to introduce some incentives to modernize the fleet of vehicle. And this is a good example in this country that was mentioned by the Commissioner, was this program that was launched a couple of years ago to modernize a fleet of almost 50,000 taxis in Cairo, with I think 350,000 tons of CO2 that emission that were saved over the years of implementation. For regional connectivities, which is all the work that is being done along regional logistic corridors in Africa, this offers a great opportunity to engage with the trucking industry. For those programs to be successful, they should not only focus on the improvement on the infrastructure, but how to make the trucking industry more efficient, looking at trade facilitation, but also in how some incentives can be introduced to modernize the fleet of trucks and professionalize the sector. This is something that the World Bank is supporting in a country like Burkina Faso, for example, which has a pilot program to work with the trucking industry to help them acquire more modern trucks that are cleaner, safer, and more efficient. No? So I think these are all areas where we can that offer some opportunity to engage and to work in this area. On the policy front, a dream for the I hope the near future would be if we could rally a number of African nations together and not only work at a level of single countries, but at a regional level, and bring several countries who are interested in championing this agenda. And we could think of both a package working on the policy side, on enforcement of those policies, countries like Ghana, who are taking bold moves to regulate the import of vehicle and the vehicle inspection procedures, but also we're working on the financing side, trying to see if we could think about innovative solutions to support transporters to move toward cleaner vehicles and cleaner mobility solutions. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that perspective. So I'd like to turn now to Mr. Eric, from the Head of Transport and Mobility from the African Union, to give us some takeaways from this discussion and also the next steps for the African continent and what you think the African Union can do to push this agenda forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lana. I'm happy to join and on behalf of Her Excellency Commissioner. First of all, one of the things I see for the African continent as explained by Ghana and also the Her Excellency Commissioner, the first challenge that we are having is that the shift to the public transport in terms of the policy is still a challenge. So one of the things we need to do is to have that mindset shift in terms of the policy, from the transport based on the individual private cars to the public transport. We have seen few countries implementing it. So as African Union Commission, we need to bring together those countries who have already done their policy, change their policy dramatically to move to the public transport. When you see where the public transport is in Africa, there is a challenge that the public transport, the service itself is not at the standards in terms of the vehicles, in terms of the services which are provided. So we are ready to partner with the World Bank in terms of putting up the public transport policy, which is going to facilitate these quality standard buses, electrical vehicles, and also to allow the non-motorized transport, because the public transport will allow now the emergence of the non-motorized transport, the cycling, and also the issue of master planning, because it all starts with the planning and design of the infrastructure, it has to be accommodating these BRTs and public transport. Last but not least, as we target the issue of vehicles, restriction of age and everything, there is a critical challenge on enforcement of what we are doing. For example, vehicle inspection centers. The vehicle inspection centers, countries like Ghana, like Kenya, like Rwanda, who have already these vehicle inspection centers, who have ability, capacity, and the facilities to evaluate the emissions. We have to bring those countries, bring together with the others to learn, to share the best practices and be able to move forward. The World Bank is also, we already partner to work on the railway sector, because there is no way we can continue to rely on vehicle, to rely on road transport. We need to bring in the railway, bring in terms of the accessibility on the urban settings, because the railway that have been designed in Africa has always been for the cargo, for moving, for longer distances. We need to bring the railway also to in terms of the accessibility to the urban cities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I think that wraps us up for this session on the global trade of used vehicles and motorization management in Africa. We thank you for joining, both in person here and online. And please continue the conversation online, because this is a critical issue that touches us all. It's a shared responsibility, as we've heard from both the country perspective and the developing and developed nations perspective and the global international financial institution perspective. So we all have a role to play. There's a great opportunity here, both economically and also for our planet. So let's all, if you're driving, drive safely and call it a day. Thank you so much.